I appreciate your help.
So when we're back, I'll get our one.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Can't wait for the next one.
Up we go.
Good morning and welcome. I'd like to thank all the Friends board members and Refuge staff for coming out this morning. And I would like to also thank our special guest, Kelly Doucette, who is the District Director for Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill. And Kelly will be making a few remarks this morning on behalf of the Congresswoman. So thank you for coming. Also, I'd like to thank Graham Taylor, our Regional Director. Came all the way down from Hadley, Massachusetts. Nice to see you, Graham. Thanks. Glad you can join us this morning. This is a great day for Great Swamp National Wildlife Refuge and for its visitors. It is a day of celebration and of remembrance as we honor the legacy of Chandler Robbins, who, as a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service employee for more than 60 years, made significant contributions to the field of ornithology. Today, we dedicate the Chandler S. Robbins Viewing Platform. Its location is one of the best in the refuge for viewing birds and especially waterfowl. The board of the Friends of Great Swamp extends its thanks to the Robbins family, and especially to Chandler's son, George Robbins, and his wife, Andrea, who are standing right here, for their generous funding of this memorial platform. Without their vision and financial support, this project would not have been possible. Leading the construction of this platform was Friends board member, Construction Committee Chairperson, George Solovey, who, as our leader, labored many hours designing, planning, and working alongside his fellow volunteers in the building of this platform. George would like to now say a few words in recognizing his fellow volunteers. George.
Well, I have a lot of people to thank, and I'm going to start from the beginning. Dave Miller and I started thinking about this project, and we came up with the idea of a two-tier design. So Dave, I need to thank you for the concept of the two-tier design.
Thanks, George.
And also your support and counsel. At various times, during the process, I'd go to Dave and we'd talk over different problems and things, and Dave was always there to help. He also did a lot of preparation on the site and cleared the way for us to bring in the lumber and remove the old blind that was here. Okay. Johnny Roush, an RV volunteer, played a vital role using the Mossmaster, that huge amphibious monster that we used to transport all the lumber and material to the site. Riding on that machine was an experience. I did it once, and let me tell you, once was enough. Now, the other thing I remember Johnny for was this structure is sitting on 3.5 by 12 by 12-foot laminated beams, and they were pretty heavy. They probably weighed 150, 160 pounds each, and they're right here underneath the lower part, but I was concerned about lifting these beams up 7 feet to the top of the columns. And I talked to Johnny about it, and Johnny said, no problem. Build a 12-foot platform, and we will raise the beams with a block and tackle. And he was right. There was no problem. The beams went up in 1.5 minutes each. The biggest thing was moving the tripod around. So thank you, Johnny, for all your help. Okay? And I need to acknowledge Steve Herdman. Steve? Okay, right. When the Marshmaster was no longer available to us, Steve took over. Now, I'm not comparing Steve with the aforementioned monster, but I got to say that Steve did a great job carrying out all the excess lumber and trash that we had, and also he brought in a lot of lumber that we used as well. And now I must acknowledge the actual people who worked on the project. We started on July 9th, and after 3 months, we finished the job. and they did all the hefty lifting. They did all the sewing and screwing together the parts to the result that you now see. So thank you, Joe Balavirchik, Tom Cartwright, Tom Gula, Richard Hasserat, unfortunately he couldn't make it today, Lee Brush, Dave Katz, Robert Schwanenberg, John Brecht,
He's not here today.
Kent Stevens, John Aschenfelter, Matt Heiss, and Bill Swallen. Now, two special people. George Robbins nailed the joist in the section that I'm standing on, I remember that. And you also worked on putting in the boards over there, right? So thank you, George, for your good work. And of course, your wonderful idea to honor your dad.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you. My grandson Adam worked on the project, providing computer drawings for the project that I submitted to the helical peel contractors to get cost estimates. He also spent a day at the site working with us. So again, thank you all. I look forward to working with you every day. You need to be very proud of your involvement for this worthy project.
I would also like to recognize, before even the work began, we had a special help from one of our friends member, Robert Lynn, who was standing there, who was very instrumental in completing a New Jersey DEP permit needed for the platform's construction. And assisting in the permitting process was our Deputy Refuge Manager, Leah McLaughlin. So we extend our thanks to both of them too. So just step up here, George. Yes, sir.
Yep.
I want to thank George for all his work. You know, towards the end of this construction, George and I were standing about over there, and we're trying to estimate how many hours of volunteer service we put into this. And I think we came up with about 2,000, which is a conservative estimate. And I'm going to venture to guess that half of those hours were donated by this one man. And that's because, you know, George began designing, planning this platform more than a year before the start of construction. George's dedication and his attention to detail is evident as soon as you walk up the boardwalk and approach the platforms. As its name indicates, this is first a memorial and second a viewing platform. Because of George's leadership, I think that the team of volunteers built a platform that is a fitting memorial for someone as notable as Chandler Robbins. Just please join me in a round of applause for the Robbins family, George and his construction volunteers, Robert and Leah and Dave Miller. Mike Warren, our complex manager, would like to now say a few words.
Good morning, everybody. I don't have prepared notes, so I'll be ad-libbing, so you'll have to forgive me. Going third in the queue of speakers, usually the first two speakers take everything that you want to say, and then I also don't want to take anything that anybody else might want to say. But what I will say is this. It was about 2 years ago, almost to the day, when Andrea called me up with the idea of honoring her father-in-law with this platform. And I remember having the conversation early on. It's like, this is a great idea. It meshes up well to some conversations that our Friends group and I are having about restoring or updating the Friends blind, which was on this site, as many of you know. I told Andrea at the time that I thought it was going to be about a 2-year process by the time that we got the permits in place, by the time we did the archaeological evaluations. And so these things frustrated George Solvay because he wanted to get right to work building this platform. So early on, George and I occupied some of our time with looking at models, and George built some scale models of what his ideas were at the time, and there's a lot of elements of this platform that were incorporated into those scale models. I knew that, you know, since my job takes me to different places, I wouldn't be able to be involved too directly with the project, but I knew we had the right team. I knew we had the Friends group with all of its talent. I knew we had Refuge volunteers with all the talent there. We had the Robbins family, and we had a great staff. And it sounds to me like, well, the project speaks for itself. And it sounds like the team came together and did a miraculous job. It looks like that. So thank you to all of you who volunteered to help build it. Thank you to George and Andrea, the whole Robbins family, for honoring their dad with this platform. I think he would be very pleased if he was here today to look at it, and somehow I think he's looking at it today anyway. So thank you to Robert Lynn for the permitting. He had the most thankless job of all. He had to do the permitting for the task at hand, and so we really appreciate all of your efforts, Robert. We know they were significant, and I know Leah put a lot of work into it too. So thank you all. I appreciate all the efforts, and the results do speak for themselves. Thank you.
So now George Robbins has some personal reflections he'd like to share with us this morning. George.
Thank you, Joe. I'll try to keep this under 2 hours. I was told that that would be a little excessive, so okay, I can do that. No, seriously, just a few things, but I want to start with the why. Why this? Why here? Why now? My wife Andrea grew up right next door here in Chatham, and I met her at the University of New Hampshire back a long, long time ago. We were both students there. She was a student in the ornithology class, and I was a teaching assistant. So from there it went. And as we would travel, we decided that we would live in New Hampshire, but we would always travel back and forth down to New Jersey to see the kids' grandparents in New Jersey, down to Maryland, see the kids' other grandparents in Maryland. So every time when we would come through, we would always stop here at the swamp. So we would stop here long before this was in anyone's dream, out to the Garden Club blind, out to the Sportsman blind, great places. And then this place was invented probably about 20 years ago. But we would come in here and we would say, we can't see anything. It's all out there. And the blind was at ground level, and it would be wet coming in here. We didn't care about that, but we just couldn't see. So the question then is, what should we do about that? Well, years went by. We'll now go to Dad. And Dad worked for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for 60 years at Patuxent Wildlife Research Center in Laurel, Maryland. And we would go down and visit him, the grandparents of my kids. So again, we would stop here on our way. And as Dad worked and did all of these different projects in all other parts of the world, he traveled. His favorite places were national wildlife refuges. He visited all 50 states. He worked in Canada and Mexico. He helped set up the Migratory Bird Treaty between the USSR and the United States back in 1976. So he traveled to Russia to do that. He traveled into the Pacific Islands. He traveled into the tropics. So we're going to fast forward some more. Dad's last 15 years, we started traveling more with him. We traveled from anywhere from Iceland to Antarctic, to South Africa, to the tropics, Panama and Trinidad and Ecuador. And as he aged, he could still walk, but we would always take him by wheelchair as he was in his mid-90s because it was a lot easier for him to get around. And so I would wheel him in his wheelchair and we'd go, you wouldn't believe some of the places I took him in his wheelchair. But this place would be absolutely fantastic, which was one of the things that we wanted, so that this would have been a place I could have been able to wheel Dad in, could have wheeled him right to there and helped him up the stairs, and I could just picture him looking out over the marsh and saying what a fantastic place this is. So that's why that was Dad. And then I also have to come to the thanks. The thanks to Joe, to George, to all the volunteers, to Steve, to Lee, to Matt, to everyone, to Tom, to Robert, to Leah, to Dave, and to Mike, and I know I'm leaving people out, Laurel and Cathy and all the contacts we've had. It's been so fantastic, and this place is something that we'll all be proud of. Dad had two things that he really wanted, and that was to educate and the citizen science. And here it is. Education of all the school groups. Over the course of the lifetime of this, there'll probably be 1 million people who come in here and look out over this, and Dad would be so happy to see this. So these were Dad's binoculars. They're here. Dad, this is for you, buddy. Thank you.
Right now, George, Andrea, and George, we're going to unveil the plaque for the platform. So I'm going to ask, I'll just get out of the way. So I'll let you guys. This is the memorial plaque that George and Andrea designed and paid for.
Thank you. Hey, Linda.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
Cathy would just like to make a statement.
Hi, I'm Cathy Woodward. Most of you know me. In 1956, Chandler was out on Midway Atoll in the middle of the Pacific. At that point, it was a post-World War II military base, but he was banding birds. And one of the birds, he banded many birds, but he banded that day a Lassen's albatross. He banded a lot of birds. In 2002, he was back at Midway Atoll, now a National Wildlife Refuge. And he found again the Lassen's albatross that he had banded that many years ago. Fish and Wildlife Service picked up on this and went and realized that that bird was coming back to Midway Atoll National Wildlife Refuge every year. And they named her. They named her Wisdom. And some of you may know, be part of that Wisdom crowd, but she continues to come back every year and nest again. And she is now the oldest. She's probably 68 years old. 69, okay. Chandler estimated she was 5 years old when he banded her the first time. He wasn't, that was an estimate, but you're probably right, at least. At least.
Yeah.
So, in this past December, so this coming December, we're going to be watching for word that she comes back again. National Wildlife Refuges have friends groups, and Midway Atoll has friends group. And they have chosen a unique way to raise some money. They make cuff bracelets with Wisdom's band number on it. And they sell these as part of the way to raise money. We would like to present to the Robbins family these bracelets. And so with that,
Oh, wow, I didn't know we were getting surprised.
for you.
Thank you.
And
very
one
much.
for your sister.
Thank you.
And one for Mary and Linda as well.
I was unaware of these.
We love this because we celebrate the system here today, and we thank you for helping us be now more connected to Midway Atoll and their friends group. Their friends group want pictures of today. Okay. They know that this is why we got these, so thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Cathy. Okay, so finally, Kelly Doucette, who's representing Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill, would like to say a few words.
Yep. Thanks so much. It's an honor to be here on behalf of the Congresswoman who's in D.C. today, but to be in this beautiful spot and to see the fruits of the collaboration of so many people in our community. But we put together a proclamation that the Congresswoman wanted me to read today. The 11th Congressional District of the great state of New Jersey honors and congratulates Friends of the Great Swamp National Refuge upon the occasion of the dedication of the Chandler S. Robbins Memorial Viewing Platform. And whereas the Friends of the Great Swamp have dedicated close to 2,000 volunteer hours working in conjunction with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and thanks to the generous support of the Robbins family, to build the Chandler S. Robbins Memorial Viewing Platform. And whereas Friends of the Great Swamp honors the memory of legendary ornithologist Chandler Robbins with the naming of this platform, principal author of Birds of North America and developer of the North American Breeding Bird Survey. And whereas Friends of the Great Swamp, with this observation deck, preserves Chandler Robbins' legacy in ornithology and conservation by providing a beautiful and accessible location for viewing, education, and appreciation of our local birds and their habitat. Now, therefore, be it known, the undersigned member of the United States Congress, the Honorable Mikey Sherrill, the 11th Congressional District of the State of New Jersey, hereby honors and congratulates the Friends of the Great Swamp National Wildlife Refuge upon the occasion of the dedication of the Chandler S. Robbins Memorial Viewing Platform. And this is the original. I'm trying to keep it a little bit dry. So I'm happy to present that to all of you, and I can make other copies.
Okay, we'll just give that to
Yeah.
Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a
Thank you
picture
very
of you
much.
with them.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you.
Important documents that were written by Chandler Robbins and other Fish and Wildlife Service employees are archived by the service's national historian, Mark Madison. Mark recently visited us here at Great Swamp. And when I told Mark about the dedication ceremony today, he expressed a desire to be here, but because of his busy schedule, he said he could not attend. But he did send me some of his thoughts about Chandler Robbins, and that he asked me to read them to you this morning. So I'll be happy to do so. It's entitled Chan Robbins, Conservation Hero. Chan Robbins was a conservation hero, both by dint of his longevity and by his impact. Robbins was born in 1918 while World War I still raged. And he came to work for the Fish and Wildlife Service in 1943 while World War II was at its turning point. He harkened back to an earlier era, having had his papers edited and sometimes written by his colleague Rachel Carson. Robbins' 63-year tenure at Patuxent Research Refuge saw many of the most important wildlife discoveries of the 20th century, many of which he was directly involved in. He helped create the North American Breeding Bird Survey, a critical tool in identifying bird numbers and their rise and decline over the decades. He authored the popular Golden Guide to Birds of North America, the critical tool for successful birding. He conducted pioneering DDT studies at Patuxent, some of which was included by his Fish and Wildlife Service editor Rachel Carson in her famous book, Silent Spring. He banded Wisdom, the albatross, in 1956, and according to Mark, and at age 69, Wisdom is still going strong as the oldest known living bird in the world. Robbins could appreciate this longevity firsthand. At age 98, Robbins was still birding, and his mind was still sharp and full of insights. A viewing platform is the perfect tribute to a man who dedicated his life to seeing the world in all its complexity and birding into his 90s. I can imagine nothing more appealing to Chan, the mentor, guidebook writer, than providing literally a platform for the next generation of naturalists. I first met Chan when he was 90 to do a long overdue oral history and to meet the legend. He wore a crazy Hawaiian-style shirt and insisted on doing the oral history outside in his beloved Patuxent habitat. We talked about moving his records to my facility when, if ever, he retired. But, of course, Chan being Chan, never really retired, working on his beloved birds until his passing. Chan was the epitome of a heroic field biologist, passionate about wildlife, insightful about nature, and as at home in the wilds as his subject matter. They truly don't make naturalists like Chan anymore. For Mark Madison, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service National Historian. So I'd just like to announce that, that in addition to this platform, the Friends of Great Swamp have decided that Mr. Robbins should be honored here at Great Swamp by holding an annual event on the second Sunday of June at the Helen Fenske Visitor Center. On this day, information about the life and legacy of Mr. Robbins will be presented, as well as information about birding and bird conservation. Also, in order to commemorate the birding survey, as we talked about, created by Mr. Robbins, we will have our own Refuge bird survey here at the Refuge with one of those survey locations right here at the viewing platform. So mark your calendars for this event for next June. And this ends our scheduled program, but we have a special event. Chris Susi is here, and it seems reasonable, Chris, that since we are dedicating a platform for the viewing of birds, that we should have a bird invited to our ceremony. Agreed. And he has brought a red-tailed hawk with him this morning, and it has just completed its rehabilitation at the Raptor Trust, where Chris is the executive director. And Chris, if you want to bring the bird up to the platform and we can release it?
Yep. But we need George and Andrea up here too.
Well, thanks so much to Refuge staff and the friends and the volunteers for putting this all together. I really appreciate that I didn't have to haul any of the lumber or bang any of the nails personally. I will be one of the people who visits this platform pretty regularly, though, I can assure you that. And maybe this guy will too. This bird was found in a swimming pool in Glen Ridge about a month and a half ago. We don't really know why or how that happened. A lot of the birds that we bring in for rehab are found by people in their yards or along the side of the road. We don't always know exactly what happened. We just sort of see the result of what happened. So it may have been chasing some prey, chasing a squirrel. It might have banged into a window and become a little disoriented. But we do know that it was in the swimming pool, and it was a little goofy for a while after that. But it's been in rehab with us and eating well and flying in a really large flight cage and has been acting just fine for several weeks. It's pretty healthy. It's an adult bird, you can see by the red tail. So we know it's got a little bit of experience living in the wild. It's at least a full year old, if not more. It's still got a little yellow in the eye, so it's probably not real old. I don't think you're 5 or 6 or 7 years old yet, but a couple years old possibly. And experienced birds like this still get into trouble. All kinds of things happen to them out there in the world, and we do our best to fix them up.
I'm curious about the yellow. Is there any way we can...
The yellow in the eye?
Yeah.
Yeah, the red tail is one of the birds whose eyes sort of get darker as they get older. So a bird, there's no real scientific measure of that. They just sort of change over time. So a bird that's got a real chocolate dark eye is definitely an older bird. The first year birds have a brown tail.
Correct.
So this bird's at least a full year old. It's had a full molt, but it's got a little yellow in its eye. So it could be 2, could be 3. It's turning a little brown, but
that's good to know. Actually,
there's also, don't look carefully because we're not really supposed to show you this, tiny little bit of green right here. We had several red-tailed hawks all in rehab in the same cage, and for us to help identify them in the cage, we put a tiny little bit of ink on their wrist. So this one was green number 47, and there was another blue one in there and a purple one, so I knew which one to get out of the cage this morning. It's got the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service band on it. It's got its own unique red-tail number on there, and that moves pretty smoothly up and down. And yeah, I mean, it's not every day that I'm overshadowed by the son of yet another preeminent ornithologist, but today's that day. So maybe George, if you want to help me let this bird go, that would be a fitting tribute to your dad. And I will do it up top.
Okay.
Unless you want a picture down here first. No, up top. Here's fine.
Let's go up there.
And then everybody kind of slide out the way.
Small female. Kind of in the middle there.
Yeah.
You ready to go, buddy?
Goodbye, beautiful.
Here we go.
And that's exactly what red tails do when you let them go. They find the first branch and then they just stick around for a while.
Check out the space.
The old, everyone thinks you throw it back. You don't need to do that.
Poor thing is so nervous.
There you go.
At least he waited.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, thanks for everybody for coming.
Thank you guys for allowing me to come work with you one day.